Scott Harrison, the founder and CEO of Charity Water. Scott, you have a background in a religious family.
Yep.
You successfully reinvented yourself in the late 20s. You went from being a nightclub promoter to a successful social entrepreneur. We live in an age where many of the audience will share this, of wanting to reinvent ourselves as a country, as individuals, as communities. You are a very successful exponent of reinvention. What advice would you give to people who aren't happy with what they're doing, who had the same experience of you, who think that their lives are empty and meaningless, but are too scared to do what you've done?
Well, you mentioned faith. I mean, that was my personal story. I had run as selfishly as possible after money and fame and girls and everything I thought that would make me happy for 10 years. And I just hit a wall. None of it did. And I kind of realized that I needed to be part of a larger story, that this wasn't about me. I was ripping through the New Testament on this vacation in Uruguay, and Jesus was so non-religious. He spent his life looking after the poor, looking after others, and that was so attractive to me. So that was a personal decision, was to kind of surrender myself and say, I'm going to make this about following God, about helping the poor. It was this verse that meant a lot to me. It said, "True religion is this, to look after widows and orphans in their distress, and to keep yourself from being polluted by the world." Well, I hadn't looked after a widow and orphan in 10 years. I hadn't written a check to a charity, and I was actually a purveyor of pollution. I sold pollution in nightclubs at 4 or 5 in the morning. So interestingly, I mean, Charity Water is not a faith-based organization. There's no agenda to the organization. We work with all people in all countries. But it was really born out of that personal spiritual transformation for me to make it about everyone else except for me. And it's been, it's been incredibly freeing. I can't imagine doing anything else. I can't imagine living the way I used to live.
For people out there, though, who might not believe in God, who might be skeptical about traditional religion, who might not have had your experience of growing up in a religious family, who still want to reinvent themselves,
Sure.
to do something fundamentally different, to start an organization, either non-profit or for-profit, what advice would you give?
I would just say to really experience radical generosity, to go out and give till it hurts. And maybe that's time, maybe that's money, not just a little bit on the side, but really give. That's been transformative to me. It's freeing when it becomes more than. It's almost like I was trying to grasp. I was trying to hold everything so tightly. When you let it go, when you give, you start looking at other people in a different way. When your whole positioning shifts from selfishness to others. It's incredibly powerful. It's incredibly freeing.
As America struggles to reinvent itself in an increasingly global and competitive market, what can it do, in your opinion, to reinvent itself?
Well, I think we need to be a little more sound in the way that we spend our money. Americans are actually very generous. I think that's been great, even through the economic downturn. The people who are giving continued to give. And I think that said a lot for the heritage of this country, the history of its country, that we are a very generous people. I think we need more of that. I think more giving, more generosity, more unselfishness would serve the leaders of the country and us as a whole.
What I like about what you seem to be doing is that unselfishness can be fun.
It really is. I mean, I think of Michael Birch, and I can speak for him, but
from Bebo.
From Bebo,
who was who was the guy who wrote your original check, right?
He was, and that was an incredible story. We'd raised so much money for water projects in the early days, and I hadn't really focused on the paying staff part of the business, but I'd raised millions of dollars for clean water, and I wound up in a situation where the lights were going to go off in 5 weeks, and I could see it. I mean, it was like the entrepreneur that kind of had failed in the short term, but failed because we'd grown too fast. And I'd met Michael once. We'd spent a total of 2 hours together. And I just kind of laid it all out for him and said, I'm so frustrated. I don't really know what to do. And he'd taken some information from our crappy office at the time, and a couple days later sent me an email and said, hey, it's great what you're doing. I just wired $1 million into your account. We went from 5 weeks of funding to 13 months. In that time, we built a sustainable business model, and I've raised $40 million since. And I think that was probably a little fun for him. I mean, I remember I got the email at midnight or 1 in the morning, and I was calling up the staff, waking them up. I was like, stop it, $1 million. We're going to do it. We're going to make it happen. So being able to change the game. Now, Michael didn't get anything out of that. The ROI is a bunch of wells. He actually then gave some of his time, helped us start coding My Charity Water, which was this fundraising platform, and raised another $8 million right off the bat with that. So I think it's been fun to both get involved, kind of time, talent, and treasure, giving of what you have. And obviously he's not in it for the money. He's in it to change the lives of some people he's never met, and some people he's actually been able to go and meet and hear from them the impact.